In the dim light of the hospital room, Oliver's eyelids fluttered open. The world around him came into focus in fragments: the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor, the sterile scent of disinfectant, and the muted murmurs of conversation. At first, everything seemed foreign and dreamlike, but slowly recognition crept in. This was a hospital. He was alive. But how? And why did everything feel so heavy? He shifted slightly, and the sensation was alien, his limbs stiff and uncooperative. A dull ache spread through his body as though it were waking up from a long, deep sleep. The faintest movement drew the attention of his brother Liam, who had been sitting vigil by his bedside. "Mom. Dad." "He's waking up." Liam's voice cracked, thick with emotion. The sound startled Oliver, and he turned his head slowly toward it, his vision still hazy. Before he could process what was happening, his parents appeared at his side, their faces a mixture of disbelief, joy, and worry. "Oliver," his mother whispered, her trembling hand brushing his forehead. "Can you hear us?" Oliver opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. His throat felt raw and parched. A nurse appeared almost instantly, holding a cup of water with a straw. She helped him drink the cool liquid, soothing his burning throat. "Take it slow," the nurse said gently. "You've been unconscious for a long time." "Long?" Oliver croaked, his voice barely audible. 10 years, his father said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You've been in a coma for 10 years. The words hit Oliver like a punch to the gut. 10 years? His mind reeled as he tried to comprehend the enormity of it. A decade of his life gone in an instant. He had gone to sleep in one world and woken up in another, the passage of time an unfathomable void. Memories of the accident began to surface: a stormy night, slick roads, and blinding headlights. He remembered the screech of tires, the jarring impact, and then nothing. The thought of losing so much time made his chest tighten with despair, but before he could dwell on it, another wave of memories crashed over him. These were not his own. Images of fire and chaos, of desperate screams and skies painted an unnatural red, flooded his mind. They were vivid and overwhelming, more real than any dream. "By next year," Oliver murmured, his voice trembling with urgency. His family leaned in closer, their faces a mix of concern and confusion. He took a shaky breath and continued, "The entire country must evacuate." The room fell into a stunned silence. His parents exchanged worried glances, and Liam's expression darkened with disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Liam asked cautiously. "Evacuate. Why?" Oliver's eyes locked onto his brother's, his gaze haunted and intense. "I saw it," he said, his voice cracking with desperation. "While I was gone. I saw the future. The UK is in danger. By next year, it'll be too late." His family struggled to process his words. They wanted to dismiss them as the confused ramblings of a man who had just woken from a decade-long coma, but there was something in his tone, something in his eyes that made them pause. It wasn't just fear, it was certainty. Liam placed a hand on Oliver's arm, his voice steady but cautious. "You've been through a lot, Ollie. Maybe these are just dreams." "They're not dreams," Oliver snapped, his sudden outburst startling everyone. His heart monitor beeped faster, and the nurse stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "Let's all take a moment," she said, glancing at Oliver's parents. "He needs rest. This has been a big shock for everyone." But Oliver wasn't finished. "Fires," he whispered hoarsely, as if the words themselves burned. "Cities turned to ash. People couldn't breathe. It's coming, Liam. You have to believe me." Liam's brow furrowed deeply. He wanted to reassure his brother, to tell him everything would be fine, but the vivid details Oliver described gnawed at the edges of his skepticism. How could he know these things? And why did it sound eerily plausible? In the days that followed, Oliver's recovery was slow but steady. Physically, he was frail, his muscles weakened from years of inactivity. The simplest movements required tremendous effort, and the hospital's physiotherapy team worked tirelessly to help him regain his strength. Mentally, however, Oliver seemed sharp, his mind consumed by the apocalyptic visions that haunted him. He spoke often of what he had seen, painting a picture of devastation that chilled his family to the bone. His descriptions were so vivid, so precise, that they felt less like dreams and more like memories. The sky, he said, was an unnatural shade of crimson, and the air was thick with smoke. Fires raged uncontrollably, consuming entire cities, and a suffocating heat blanketed the land. Liam listened, torn between disbelief and unease. He wanted to chalk it up to hallucinations, a side effect of Oliver's coma, but the conviction in his brother's voice made it hard to dismiss outright. "Do you think it's climate change?" Liam asked one evening, his tone tentative. "I don't know," Oliver admitted, his expression grim. "But I know it's coming. And if we don't act, millions will die." The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. Liam's instinct was to protect his brother, to shield him from the world's ridicule, but he couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread in his own heart. What if Oliver was right? Strange events soon began to validate Oliver's warnings. News reports spoke of unprecedented wildfires breaking out across the UK, an anomaly that baffled scientists and sparked widespread concern. Rivers ran dangerously low and reservoirs dried up. Heat waves became more frequent and intense, pushing infrastructure to its limits. Liam found himself unable to shake the parallels between these events and Oliver's descriptions. The pieces were falling into place, and it terrified him. He began to see his brother's warnings in a new light, not as the delusions of a recovering coma patient, but as a genuine call to action. One night, as they sat together in the quiet of the hospital room, Liam decided to confront the truth head-on. "What exactly did you see, Ollie? Tell me everything." Oliver hesitated, his eyes searching Liam's for signs of doubt. Then, with a deep breath, he began to recount his visions in excruciating detail. He spoke of a world on fire, of skies choked with ash and air so thick with smoke that people suffocated in their homes. He described rivers boiling away and forests consumed by flames, their blackened skeletons stretching toward the heavens like a macabre tribute. It wasn't just heat, Oliver said, his voice trembling. The air felt wrong, toxic. People were dying not just from the flames, but from something in the atmosphere. It was like the planet itself was turning against us. Liam listened, his stomach churning with unease. The vivid imagery lodged itself in his mind, refusing to be dismissed. He wanted to believe it was all a bad dream, but the growing evidence around them made denial increasingly difficult. "You think it'll happen next year?" Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think," Oliver replied, his gaze unwavering. "I know." As the days turned into weeks, Oliver's determination grew. He felt a deep, almost primal need to share his warning with the world, but his family was hesitant. They worried about the toll it would take on him, both physically and emotionally. More than that, they feared the ridicule he might face if people didn't believe him. "Let's focus on your recovery first," his father suggested gently. "You've been through so much already." Oliver reluctantly agreed, but his sense of urgency never waned. Every news report about wildfires or droughts felt like a countdown to the catastrophe he had seen. He spent hours watching the television in his hospital room, his heart sinking with each news story of environmental collapse. Weeks passed, but the tension in Oliver's hospital room was palpable. Every day, Liam sat by his side, watching his brother's unease grow as more news of environmental chaos surfaced. The rivers were drying up at unprecedented rates, wildfires raged across parts of the UK, and record-breaking temperatures became the norm. Despite his physical frailty, Oliver grew more determined to warn the world. He had been hesitant at first, but as the days unfolded, he realized the luxury of waiting wasn't one he could afford. "I can't stay silent," Liam Oliver said one evening, his voice trembling but resolute. "People need to know what's coming." Liam leaned forward, his face shadowed with concern. "Ollie, I believe you. But people out there, they won't. They'll think you're crazy." "Let them," Oliver shot back, his eyes blazing. "It doesn't matter what they think of me. If even one person listens, if one family packs up and leaves, it'll be worth it." Liam sighed. He admired his brother's courage, but he also knew the world could be cruel. He didn't want Oliver to face mockery or rejection. "Let's be smart about this," Liam said, placing a hand on Oliver's shoulder. Their first attempts to contact the media were met with polite skepticism at best and outright dismissal at worst. Journalists treated Oliver's story as the ramblings of a man waking from a decade-long coma, more fiction than fact. Some even laughed in their faces. Each rejection stung, but Oliver refused to back down. Finally, after weeks of frustration, a small independent news outlet agreed to hear him out. The journalist, a woman named Sarah, met Oliver in his hospital room. She listened intently as he described his visions, her expression shifting from polite curiosity to something far more serious. "I can't explain it," Oliver said, his hands gripping the sides of his hospital bed. "I don't know why I saw what I did, but it wasn't just a dream. It was real, Sarah, and it's happening faster than anyone realizes." Sarah nodded, her pen scratching furiously across her notepad. "You're describing events that are already unfolding," she said. "The fires, the heat waves, it all matches up. But you're saying it gets worse next year." "Much worse," Oliver replied. "What we're seeing now is just the beginning." Sarah promised to share his story, but she warned him that the public response might not be kind. "People are scared enough as it is," she said. "Some will listen, but many won't believe you." "I don't care," Oliver said. "If there's even a chance I can save lives, it's worth it." Sarah's article was published the following week. Titled "A Warning from the Coma Prophet, Could Oliver's Vision of 2025 Be Real?" It quickly gained traction online. At first, the response was largely dismissive, with readers mocking the idea of a man predicting the future from his hospital bed. But as wildfires continued to spread and temperatures soared, a growing number of people began to take Oliver's warning seriously. The tipping point came when a respected climatologist publicly backed Oliver's claims. In a televised interview, the scientist pointed out that the environmental trends Oliver described were not only plausible but likely if immediate action wasn't taken. Whether he saw the future or not, the climatologist said, his message aligns with what the data is telling us. The UK is heading for a catastrophic summer in 2025. Social media exploded with debates and discussions, and the hashtag #EvacuateTwenty25 began trending worldwide. Some people dismissed the movement as fear-mongering, while others began making plans to leave the UK. Oliver watched the chaos unfold from his hospital bed, a mix of relief and guilt swirling inside him. He had wanted people to listen, but the scale of the reaction was overwhelming. Families were packing up their lives, businesses were relocating, and entire communities were being torn apart by the decision to stay or go. Liam stayed by his side through it all, offering quiet support. "You did what you had to do, Ollie," he said one night as they watched a news report about the growing exodus. "You gave people a chance." "Not enough of them," Oliver murmured. "Millions are still here. They think it's a hoax or a conspiracy. When it happens, Liam, they won't be ready." Liam didn't know what to say. He wanted to comfort his brother, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Oliver was right. The signs were all around them, growing louder and harder to ignore. As 2025 approached, tensions in the UK reached a boiling point. The government faced mounting pressure to address the crisis, but officials remained divided. Some dismissed Oliver's warnings as baseless hysteria, while others quietly began preparing for the worst. Meanwhile, Oliver's health took a turn for the worse. The strain of his mission had taken a toll on his already fragile body, and he spent more and more time in bed, his strength fading. Despite this, he refused to stop speaking out. "I don't have much time left," he told Liam one day, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'll keep fighting until my last breath." The breaking point came in July 2025. A record-breaking heatwave swept across the UK, triggering wildfires on an unprecedented scale. Entire towns were evacuated as flames devoured forests and fields, the smoke visible from miles away. Hospitals were overwhelmed with patients suffering from heat stroke and respiratory issues, and the death toll climbed steadily. In the midst of the chaos, Oliver passed away. He had fought tirelessly to warn the world, but his body could no longer keep up. Liam and his parents were devastated, but they found solace in the knowledge that Oliver's efforts had not been in vain. His warnings had saved countless lives, and his story became a symbol of resilience and hope in the face of disaster. After Oliver's death, Liam took up his brother's cause. He traveled across the UK, speaking about Oliver's vision and the lessons it held for the future. "My brother saw what was coming," Liam told audiences. "He tried to save us, and in many ways he did. But now it's up to us to make sure this never happens again." Oliver's story became a rallying cry for climate action, inspiring a global movement to address the environmental challenges facing the planet. Though he was gone, his voice continued to echo, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and determination could light the way.